Greetings, everybody. Steve the Amateur Historian coming to you from Southeast Portland near 82nd and Holgate because I am going to do another video visiting another cool old historic cemetery and showing you the graves of some people of interest here, people that I've covered in past videos, even a couple of people that I haven't, that I just discovered their stories on. There's a Friends, I think it's called Friends of Multnomah Park Cemetery, and I believe this is the only entry that's still open. Most of the entryways to this place are locked off, and the hours that you're allowed to come in here, at least according to like Google, are really bizarre. They're like, you can only come here Monday. It's like Monday and Tuesday, which today is a Tuesday, and you can't, you can, like today, you can be here from 12, I think it's like 12 a.m. to 5:48 a.m. So I don't think that's accurate, but whatever. You know, even if those are the specific hours, I'm here during normal operating cemetery hours. So anyway, pretty much all of my exploration is going to be focused towards this half that I'm on. So this little crossing road here, I'm not going to really be seeing anything on that side. Not because I wanted to keep this video to one half. It's just everybody I found is literally here or here. It just turned out that way. So I'm going to turn here, walk down here, and begin today's video by showing you some of the more prominent people that have been buried buried here, including the individual that the neighborhood I'm in right now, at least I think I'm in the Lentz neighborhood, I'm at least on the fringe of it, the individual that this part of town is named after, a guy named Oliver P. Lentz, who actually, as I understand it, he donated this land to become this cemetery. Yeah, there's like at least like 4 specific spots that I want to see in Section A. I'm also going to try to search for another grave that I missed when I came here a couple of years ago on a Historic Murders of Portland episode. See if I'll be lucky to find it again. So I'm wondering, looking at it, see, it's interesting. Some of the most prominent people here, if you look them up on findagrave.com, you can't actually find where they're at. I mostly figured out where the Lentz are because a couple of members of the family you could find where they were, and they were up towards the front half of Section A. And I'm pretty sure this is Oliver Lentz and his wife's gravestone. So the person who founded this whole area and provided this land, you can't even really find their location on like findagrave.com, but I know that there's a bunch of people from the Lentz family here. Okay, so this is the Lentz family, but this is not actually Oliver. These are relatives of his, but I thought him and his wife had a kind of red, well, actually, I know some, yeah, here we go. I was going to say, a lot of them have multiple names on them. So yeah, O.P. Lentz, that is Oliver Lentz. And born 1830, lived to 1899, founder of the Lentz neighborhood, which kind of ends up where I am, but goes on a little bit further, kind of that direction. And his wife, Martha. So yeah, there's probably, oh, nope, this side is bare. But yeah, I know that they had, according to findagrave.com, they had at least 10 children. Oh, so this is probably at least like a grandchild if he was born in 50. So yeah, so these are later on generations, which makes sense. I mean, if you found the area, you probably had, it wouldn't surprise me if this, like, yeah, I see Lent there. Like, this whole entire area was probably secured just for members of the Lentz family. Yeah, see, here's William, son of, lived to only be, didn't even make it to 10 years old. Of course, unfortunately, you know, back in the 1800s, yeah, this is another child of theirs that only lived, looks like, about 2 years. So yeah, the founder and his wife and multitude of their family buried here at Multnomah Park. And another prominent individual that the only reason I could figure out generally where his gravestone was is because you could see this in the background. And that is an individual who was a close friend of Oliver P. Lentz, a guy by the name of Plimpton Kelly, who was the son of Clinton Kelly, who was a very prominent early Portlander. But Plimpton was pretty well regarded in his own right. I did a film about Kelly Butte, which was originally obtained. Oh yeah, no, is that? No, that's got to be like his son, probably named after. I was like, is this where Clinton Kelly's buried? Because that's very modest, but that's 1869, and Plimpton was born in 1828. But anyway, the Kelly name is the name that is given to Kelly Butte, which of course I've done numerous videos on, and if these buildings were in the way, you could probably almost see Kelly Butte in the distance from here. It's like a mile that way. And I believe that was established on land that Plimpton Kelly specifically had owned. So, Plimpton Kelly, another prominent early Portlander who was friends with the Lentz family. And that being said, I'm gonna cycle. This is really cool. I love these gravestones that are in the shape of open books. But I'm gonna make my way back over to section A here, because there's a couple more people I want to find. Specifically, I'm gonna take another crack at finding Thomas Edwards's gravestone, which I failed to do a few years ago. Thomas and Ina Edwards, and I marked that to go about 9 rows down and 5 graves in. And I actually saw the pictures of their graves, and they're very tiny, kind of easy to miss graves. But I came here for an Historic Murders of Portland episode, and I spent about 45 minutes in here and could not find their graves. So theoretically, should be like 5 in. At least in this general vicinity. Yeah, like look at this. There's probably graves. Well, I mean, it looks like they're trimming this back, but I mean, like look at this. Like, these are graves. Laurel Burrow something. Yeah, so if I'm looking for very indistinct gravestones, it's not going to be easy to find them. I don't think these are them. But yeah, they should be right in here. So I don't know if they've been buried over time or what, but this is the second time, and I'm not going to spend an hour looking for gravestone that I just can't find. Reportedly, in this general vicinity that I'm kind of standing in is where Thomas and Ina Edwards are supposed to be buried, and they're probably buried somewhere in here. And Thomas Edwards in 1919 woke up one day. They lived in I think on like 86th or 87th, like it's a little ways off that direction. And Thomas Edwards was a religious zealot, to put it lightly. And he woke up one morning, went and sat down at the breakfast table, like any other morning. His wife came in, the kids that they had, I believe, were present, and he just pulled a gun out and shot his wife, their mother, dead. Told a neighbor, admitted that he'd done it, and then he killed himself. So they're presumably buried together, like right over there. But yeah, being a religious zealot, it was one of those things where it was kind of like, it was treated like he was trying to save her soul from eternal damnation. So of course, what's the best way to do that than to kill somebody? Murder is wrong. There's a commandment that says thou shalt not kill. But of course, if you decide in your deluded mind that you're saving a loved one from whatever, then I guess that's when murder becomes justified. And that being said, I'm trying to get over, according to documentation, Section A, Lot 130, is supposed to be off on the end of Section A, over by the fence here. I heard a guy screaming really loud over here earlier. But I'm looking for the grave of Harvey Hibbard, which again should be, like, they pretty much say it's way off to the end. Well, alas, it appears I've been foiled again. It said I even pulled up a picture of it, so I know exactly what it looks like. And it should be probably somewhere around here. Are there any firm spots? I can't tell. Because there's this grave, but this is not his grave. I've seen a picture of it. It's a very flat, indistinct grave. It says H. Hibbard. And it's supposed to be off to the far north. It would be the northwest corner, which this is the northwest corner, 2 spots down. So, I mean, theoretically, it would more be like right here, based on their description. But I'm not seeing anything resembling a gravestone here. And it was even less distinct than this one. So, anyway, he's not here, and there's a woman having a freak out over here, so I'm gonna start walking this way. It's probably the person I was hearing screaming earlier. It's unfortunate. But anyway, Harvey Hibbard was a 9-year-old boy that in 1920 got his hands on a loaded gun from his house, and him and his friend were outside running around playing, chasing games, whatever, and his friend ended up shooting him with a gun that he probably didn't realize was loaded. So that unfortunately took the life of Harvey Hibbard, who again was only 9 years old. So I saw that pop up in a Friends of Portland piece. So a lot of mystery to Section A. I found where the Lentz are really quick, but the other 2 people I've looked for, can't seem to find them. Which moves us to Section B, which is this glorious little section right here. So I'm going to start looking for the gravestone of Howard Sigsbee. Where are you, Mr. Sigsbee? I swear to God, this better not be another dead end. I'll figure this out. I'm so stupid. I came over to do Section B, thinking that's Section A, this must be Section B. No, that's Section B. Son of a monkey's uncle. Meanwhile, that person that's been screaming, they're still screaming. That's still a whole thing. But anyway, this is Section B. There's a little bit of history. Multnomah Park Cemetery, founded in 1888, is among 14 pioneer cemeteries owned and operated by Metro. This historic place reflects the rich past of Portland's early days. Located in this cemetery are the final resting places of Oliver P. Lent, founder of the original town of Lent, and William Johnson, who operated a sawmill on the creek that now bears his name. Oh, Johnson Creek. So the guy who Johnson Creek's named after is buried somewhere out here. I wish I would have known that. I'm not going to go searching for his grave now. Both individuals I'm looking for are going to be located more towards this end and actually relatively close to each other. But over here, I'm looking for the graves of Howard Sigsbee and Ada Haskins. So probably somewhere in here. I'm going to start looking for Mr. Sigsbee. Howard, where are you? Howard. There's an open spot here. I see a little bit of concrete here. I hope that's not his gravestone. This is like right about where he would be, unfortunately. Or this. I can't tell if these are gravestones or just concrete. There's some, yeah, see, because there's this, and like, I'm like, is that, there's something chiseled into it. I think this is a gravestone. Something arch? Yeah, so I think there's gravestones that are just buried. I don't know why I can't find anything. Findagrave.com, you're kind of letting me down, right? It's not even findagrave.com. Some of these graves, it's where the Friends of Multnomah Park said they'd be located. But I am not finding them. And this is, I've learned my lessons from the past. I've made sure to mark down Yeah, she's only supposed to be about 8 rows down and like 2 graves off. I hope that's just not another grave that's been, like, what does this one say? That says like Parker. Yeah, I can't find any of these people. And I think it's honestly because some of their graves are buried. And Ada Haskins should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Should be like right here. It would, when all is said and done, it would make sense if Ada Haskins' grave was just some small little stone that got forgotten and buried. Because she was a woman living kind of a rough life, and she was living at a rundown hotel in downtown, and there's still a little bit of mystery about it. I want to do a Historic Murders of Portland episode about it, but she was found during the 1930s. I want to say it was 36. She was, someone had taken her somewhere. I don't know if it was where she was found dead, and they garroted her, killed her off, and her body was found in Washington Park. I wonder if, I don't know, because that doesn't fit with the diagram, because the diagram included this and showed this as its own section. I just want to make sure this wasn't also part of section B. Yeah, I think that's what happened, because there's lots of little pieces of concrete. Like, that's definitely a gravestone right there. It says like silent or something, but I mean, it's you can barely see any of it. I think that's what happened, because according to the diagram that I have, William Sigsbee should be like right in here, and there's like little pieces of kind of concealed concrete kind of poking their heads out. And see, there's kind of suddenly like yeah, he would be pretty much like right here, and there's like a little piece of concrete there. Well, at least there's some interesting graves to look at. This one's kind of distinct. But yeah, Mr. Sigsbee, who is reportedly buried somewhere in the vicinity of where I'm standing. Maybe a little bit over there, maybe a little bit over here. But he was buried here in, what year was it? Was it 1920? 1921. He was fooling around with a woman named Agnes Purdon, guessing is how her name was spelled. And Purdon's estranged husband came in with a gun, opened fire on him, and then after shooting both of them, he pulled like a hatchet out and then proceeded to hatchet Sigsbee to death. And he's supposed to be right in this area, but he's hiding from us. So unlike Lone Fir, where I just didn't come prepared with ideas of where people were buried, the specific locations, and in a couple instances I just literally was at the wrong part of the cemetery, I just can't find these graves. And I think some of them are just, they're either in a state like this where you literally can't tell who they are, or they're like buried. There's a lot of very obscure looking gravestones out here. But as it stands, somewhere in this area should be the grave of Mr. Sigsbee, and way over there, kind of towards the end there, is where Ada Haskins' remains should be. And Ada Haskins was one I was actually really looking forward to seeing. Thinking section B was off over there, I said I wasn't even going to come to this half of the cemetery today. Well, that didn't turn out, did it? There's another woman buried here, but it says she's in section X, and I don't know where that is. The diagram that I have of the cemetery does not include a section X. I don't know why there would be a section X, but apparently she's lot 120 in Section X. So I don't think that little area is Section X, and that little area doesn't even look like it has a lot of people buried there. I kind of did a mock diagram here. Go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. No X. I wouldn't begin to know where her grave is located, but it was a woman that I did a Historic Murders of Portland episode on. Very tragic example of something that was fairly common, which was back in the olden days of Portland. You didn't just have husbands that were chronic alcoholics, you had wives that were alcoholics too. And Nellie Teves and her husband were both chronic drinkers, and one night they both had just been drinking up a storm, and in the process of doing that, it seems some raging ensued, and Nellie's husband ended up killing her. And her husband was so belligerent and drunk when this happened that he literally, after killing her, just left their house and was gone for several hours, and he was just wandering to and from various saloons in the area. He pretty much had no idea till he sobered up that he had killed his wife. So she's buried in Section X, wherever that may be, reportedly here at this cemetery. And to wrap things up, and I know this I can't help it if this is, this cemetery isn't quite as well maintained, it seems, as, say, Lone Fir, where most of the graves are very visible. And also, I think, a lot of people just, there may have been a lot more poor people that were buried here, and they could only afford modest graves, that it's just easier for them to become overcome by the elements or kind of disappear into the landscape. So it makes sense that some of them can't be found, but, you hate it when you come out here to see stuff, and the stuff you're specifically looking for can't be found. So I'm hoping to find one more grave of somebody who I haven't covered in a video before. And even though I can't find all of these graves, I'm giving these people some attention. I'm going to the spots where they are supposed to be and still telling their stories, and that's what's most important. But I think the more kind of, depending on the type of cemetery you go to, whether it's going to have a lot of tiny kind of nondescript graves, is going to make it harder for you to find certain ones. And that seems to have been the case for my situation. But I'm going to Section H, which should start, there's this little road that comes up and ends at this one. Over here, and to that side of where that road is, that should be Section H. Is kind of furthest off to the northwest corner of the cemetery. I'm looking for the grave of a guy named William Vestal. So William Vestal will be kind of towards the middle and a few graves over, so probably somewhere in here. And this was just somebody that I literally was going through real quickly. There were so many names. I was going through like an Excel. So yeah, these graves are I'm not holding out any hopes I'm going to find what I'm looking for. These graves are very, very modest in certain circumstances. So hopefully I can find Mr. Vestal's grave. And again, I found his name. Hello, Pooch. I found his name just looking at a Excel spreadsheet, and I started pulling up names, a couple names that drew attention for me from Find a Grave, and there was this big article about this guy, and he had definitely an interesting upbringing, which is kind of brought me to this area. Excuse me, mutt. Oh, I found him. I stopped paying attention for 1 second. Wait, this is William Lewis Vestal, but it says born 1917, died 1917, so this is probably, a child? Because this is the name, William Vestal. So I don't know. It wouldn't make sense for him, the dad, to have like no grave really, but for like one of their children. But it says 1917 to 1917, like it was a baby that died. Yeah, this is a baby grave. This is a baby grave. These are like, yeah, these are all baby graves. So this is probably, I know that I heard mention of like a baby section up here. So I'm guessing so that's why these are all these very tiny little gravestones. This is probably specifically the baby section. So I'm wondering if this was one of the children because I know William Vestal had a family. Pooch, you are killing my video right now. You're adorable, but you're killing my video. So yeah, even though this is like right where William Vestal's grave would be, I'm wondering if this was one of his children who died. I mean, that's right where the William Vestal I'm talking about is supposed to be, but it's in the baby graves area. So I don't know if he just got buried here during that time or before or what exactly, even though it still implies that that's like a baby's grave. But I guess that makes sense that he would, I know, that's where it said he was. And this was not, I wasn't making a mistake in pulling up one of his children that died in infancy instead of his actual gravestone. I didn't even click on any of his family members. I just looked at his information and it put his grave right there. So I don't know what to make of that, everybody. But William Vestal just got my attention because when I pulled him up on findagrave.com, there was a piece, it was actually a very detailed account. It even went beyond like what an obituary would say. And it delved into this guy's life. And essentially this guy, he was born in North Carolina, moved to Nevada. And when he was very young, his father died in like a structural fire. Like, I don't know if it was a house fire or a building fire. So he was gone. And then his mom abandoned him. And he pretty much was an orphan that was left he was left with this like facility where as like a child he was like worked long hours and stuff. It's like a really tragic thing, and he managed to get away from that. And when he got away from that, he actually stayed with some local Native Americans that kind of saved him from that tragic situation he ended up in as a child. And in the documentation I read, he said he gave those Native Americans that helped him, he gave them all the credit in the world for literally saving his life. Like he was going to be a child laborer for the rest of his life. And these Native Americans liberated him from that horrible life. And he ended up being able to go on, get good work, and start a family. And probably lived a fairly decent life after that, I would hope. But it was such an interesting background to come from. So I just saw that one little name, and that got my attention. And so I thought I'd just cover his story real quick. And again, there's a mystery to why adult William Vestal is, his gravestone is right where there's a William Vestal gravestone, but it implies that it's a baby. I don't know what to make of that. But anyway, still, for how hard it is to sometimes find the graves you're looking for, it is a beautiful historic pioneer cemetery. And, there's a few graves I couldn't find. I wish I could, but it is what it is. I think some of those graves have just been lost to time. And considering the circumstances of some of those people, it's probably people didn't really have a whole lot of investment in making sure their graves were well maintained. Namely Ada Haskins, who was kind of just living out of a flop house and died tragically. And even William Sigsbee, who died this horrible death, but he was also fooling around with a woman who I think was still technically married, and society frowns on that. So that is my brief visit to Multnomah Park Cemetery, a place that's literally diagonal from the plaza that I've worked at for the last several years. And I've walked through here before, but I've never really spent much time in here. So it was nice to come in here and to be able to find at least what I did find. You know, it's better than nothing. And I hope you were able to enjoy. And all that said, if you're new to the channel, remember, it's always to like, share, subscribe, help my channel keep growing. I have a Patreon if you want to help me out that way. Helps make what I'm doing a lot easier. The link to that is in the description of this video, as well as links to my Instagram, Facebook, Reddit subreddit, and my TikTok. So, all of that said, till next time, from the Multnomah Park Cemetery in Southeast Portland, this has been Steve the Amateur Historian, and I'll see you next time.